friends, I wanted to come by and talk to you about a docuseries I just finished watching on Max. It's about the Galvin family and it's called Six Schizophrenic Brothers. This family had 12 children and six of the brothers ended up developing schizophrenia. They were picture perfect family and until probably around the teenage years of the oldest brothers, things were perfect, things were beautiful. And then the oldest brother started to display odd behaviors, some violent tendencies, and this was going on for about 10 years. And then the other brothers started to develop some of the same symptoms, quite frankly, hallucinations, delusions, walking around, talking about God. There were violent outbursts from some of the brothers. Other horrible things happened. I don't want to describe all of that. But there were other things that I think were really important to take from this film, and I want to share those things with you. But the big thing is that some of the brothers were able to get treatment. Some of them are doing well now. They're thriving, often with the support of some of their family members, primarily one, the sister, and they are other family members that understandably said, I cannot continue to be there with my brothers. There has been so much harm and damage from the relationship, and that is something that often happens in this very serious mental illness. I think two of the biggest things that were highlighted in this movie is how long it takes to actually recognize that something is going on and to figure out what it is. And that is very classic in schizophrenia. And then it's about what to do. A lot of times with this disorder, the key thing is people don't actually realize that they're sick. If people have a heart attack, they feel the chest pain. Schizophrenia robs you of your insights. A lot of times, the individuals don't know that they're sick and they might take medications, they might be in treatment for a while, and then they stop and the cycle restarts again. And that's one of the hardest things about treating schizophrenia. So, why am I even talking about this? And I will say I am an emergency psychiatrist. I'm Dr. Ajwa. I work in various emergency rooms in New York City, and a lot of my patients do suffer from schizophrenia, and they are brought into the emergency room in the midst of a mental health crisis. A lot of times because they were acting erratic on the street, or there was a violent outburst, or the family noticed some other things. So I wanted to talk about a few other big key concepts. I'm not going to go into all the nitty-gritty details of the movie, but definitely I think that you should watch this series because there is so much to learn. And when I even think about my first experiences with people in my life that were developing psychotic disorders, we didn't know what it was. They were acting odd, they were acting strange. And so that's the first thing. A lot of times with schizophrenia, it takes a couple of years to diagnose. And those years when the symptoms are just emerging in the late teens, early 20s, and sometimes even a little bit into the early 30s, we call that the prodromal period. People might become more withdrawn, they might seem more anxious, seem depressed, and so that's the diagnosis they often get. But then some of the psychotic or disorganized symptoms start to emerge. And those include the most common ones are the hallucinations that people think about, where people might be hearing voices. Sometimes they're nondescript, or they can be very clear to the person and saying things or telling them to do things. People might develop delusions, delusions of grandeur, or thinking something's happening. I have a lot of patients that think that there is something wrong with them physically, or there could be something wrong with people around them, that people are trying to hurt them. And these behaviors, these thoughts, often lead them to act in a certain way that sometimes can be dangerous to themselves or to the people around them. So I think one of the other big things that I want to mention in this movie is that it did highlight a lot of violence. And while that can happen, is not the most common thing I will say from individuals that have schizophrenia. And I do want to dispel the notion that everyone that has schizophrenia is a danger to themselves or a danger to others. That happens in some people. And when you are in a situation with someone, or when you see that someone is in a situation that's not safe, yes, you are going to call for help. It's truly an emergency. You call 911 so that EMS can get there, sometimes the police or even the fire department might show up depending on what is the actual issue, what you describe happening. But getting help immediately is key because dire things can happen. People can be hurt or even lose their lives, and you don't want that to happen. But one of the other things, again, that happened in this film that we saw was that a lot of the brothers did go to treatment. This is a really hard thing to admit is happening in your family with someone that you also for someone to recognize is happening to themselves and to admit to themselves. Patients with schizophrenia many times won't take their medications. They might take it for a while, especially when something big has happened. There's been a change in their life. They're in the hospital, but then they get good and they're like, I'm fine. I don't have any issues. And you stop. And a lot of us with any type of disease will say, all right, I'm good for now. Do I keep taking this? But with schizophrenia, it often robs your insight that you even have a disorder. And so people will be resistant to treatment. And that's one of the hardest obstacles to overcome. But if there's that window, if there's opportunity, the treatments that we have are very, very good and people can live very successful lives with treatment. And there are many treatment options, not only with medications, but even with something that we call electroconvulsive therapy. And that's when people are really, really sick and may not respond only to the medications. And then another thing I want to mention is the importance of family support. The mother in this story was very supportive of her sons and made it so that they could live at home. And that is not everyone's calling. I understand that. And you should not take that on as a burden. One of the daughters in the movie did take it on to take care of her brother's promise to her mother. And that's something to that can also be talked about. Should that burden have been put on her, the youngest daughter, Mary, or not? But people with schizophrenia need a lot of support because schizophrenia is most a cognitive disorder. So it affects your ability to do the normal things like remember to eat, to shower, to organize, to pay bills, to just know what to do next. Some people might describe an indecision. And having support from people to either remind you to do things, to teach you how to do things until it becomes second nature is important. And whether that is from a family member or from professional helpers, staff, is really important for the treatment of people with schizophrenia. And the last thing I want to say is that there is hope. A lot of do think of schizophrenia as a very scary disease, and it is. I think schizophrenia and Alzheimer's disease are the two most challenging disorders that I treat. But there is help available. There is a lot of support. So if you or a family member is suffering with this, reach out for help. I want to just reiterate, I hope that you get a chance to watch this because it gives you a really good picture of what some of the symptoms people are experiencing, how someone with schizophrenia experiences their world themselves and the family and friends around them, and how we can support individuals living with that disease. Thanks.